I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time with this case because I don't think you're wrong. States can define this the way they want. The problem here is not what the state of Alabama is doing. The Alabama state is doing what all courts are doing. You haven't pointed me to Perkins or any other court where the rule that you're proposing has been adopted by Alabama. When we get that case, we might answer your question, but in the abstract, I don't know how we can answer it here. You didn't argue this below. Your own expert did exactly what you say is wrong. Your own expert said he had valid scores between 72 and 78, and he relied on all of the other indicia to determine that he believed this person wasn't intellectually disabled. Respondents, experts, concluded differently, and the district court credited respondents' experts. But please point me to somewhere in the record in the district court where you made this argument. In 2015, the 11th Circuit, not the order before us, determined that the Alabama courts had erred unreasonably because they had done exactly what Hall told them they couldn't do. They looked at the three scores that were extant at the time, 72, I think it was 72 and 274s or something like that. It wasn't the 78. The 78 came later. And they said, on the basis of those scores alone, he wasn't intellectually disabled. And that's exactly what Hall, the year before, had said was wrong to do. You didn't appeal that decision, so we have to accept that the district court is now the finder of fact. And if the district court is the finder of fact, it can do exactly what you're saying. Follow Alabama law and show me one case in Alabama that has followed your rule. Tell me where in the trial record you argued that somehow aggregating scores, that somehow medium scores, that somehow there was one perfect IQ score that states could require. Just show it to me. Point me to the record.
Respectfully, Your Honor, at the start of your question, you asked, what is Alabama law? And I say Perkins says it's an IQ of 70 or below. And you implied that
But how do you prove that? And Alabama courts do exactly what the district court does here. It looks at the SEMS. That's what the court did here. It then decides whether the person is within the range of intellectual disability, which the court did here. The SEMS certainly are at least 3 out of the 5 are within disability. And then it looks to other things to determine whether the person's intellectually disabled. It's exactly what we told people to do in Hall. It's exactly what we told people to do in Moore. What you're asking us to do is to undo those cases, because both in Hall and in Moore, there were various scores, just like in this case. In Hall, there were 9 scores between, what were the figures? 9 scores between, I can't remember now.
71 and above.
Not much, even worse than here, between 71 and 80. Here, there are 5 scores between 72 and 1 score of 78. And in Hall, only 1 of the lowest scores fell within SEM.
So
here there were 3.
I'd like to clarify first Alabama law, because in Your Honor's own description of what the state courts did in this case, they relied on the scores of 72, 74, and 75. And now they have Hall.
Without looking at the SEM. And we in Hall the year before said, you have to look at the SEM.
We've
and
cited,
they didn't.
We've cited multiple Alabama cases, Bush, Byrd, and Kalin, all of which had similar scores to Smith's here.
If you read every one of those cases, the courts there did exactly what this court did here. They looked at all of those scores, then they looked at the adaptive functioning to determine whether the person was actually at the lower end of the score or the higher end of the score.
State courts have,
Can you dispute that that's what those courts did?
in some cases, the courts do look to other evidence, but they don't grant an Atkins claim based on that other evidence. There's not an Alabama case in which an offender was known to have an IQ above 70 and yet won his Atkins claim. And there's certainly not an Alabama case in which the courts plucked the lowest score alone and said that represents a possibility of intellectual deficits and moved on.
That's actually